and we're joined here today with Daniel Pearlstein, Executive Vice President of Strategy of Canopy Rivers. Welcome to the show.
Thanks very much for having me, Brandon.
Absolutely. And I can imagine you've been busy lately. A lot of things have been developing in the United States, and just in general, the space has been, there's no lack of stories, let's call it that way. But what are you excited about right now, and what have you been up to over the last little while?
Sure. Okay, good start. Yeah, obviously a lot of stuff happening in the space. Let's start with legalization. That's Canada being the first G20 nation to legalize adult use cannabis, and I think a lot of different operators are now figuring out, okay, how am I laying the foundation for the next 3 to 5 years? This is legalization, and some of the people in the government have said this. Legalization is not an event; it's a process. And what Canopy Rivers is doing is building that long-term foundation. We're building that process. Canopy Rivers is the venture capital affiliate of Canopy Growth.
Yeah.
Similar to how Google has Google Ventures to make investments. So whereas Canopy Growth likes acquisitions,
yep,
Canopy Rivers minority stake investments that take a variety of structures into a variety of different operators. We have a portfolio of 11 investments, and now we're focusing on ancillary and emerging markets.
Gotcha.
So over, let's say the last couple months, we're probably highlighted by Rivers being a separate company from Growth. Our go public on the TSXV under the symbol RIV, RIV. So that happened around a month before legalization. So the summer was obviously very busy, kind of getting the company public, providing a lot of investor education in how we appeal to investors, providing really a long-term play and access and exposure to these ancillary and emerging markets, generally private companies that aren't yet available on public exchanges. So Rivers provides a unique investment vehicle for investors to get exposure to not only cannabis 2.0, but cannabis 3.0.
Yeah.
So over the last little while, particularly in my role, has been helping work with the portfolio and provide some market intelligence and work with the operators, understanding new regulatory regimes, stuff in Ontario that's changed recently. Yeah. But also looking at emerging markets around the world where you have the United Kingdom and Mexico as a few other countries that have really come on, and it's saying, okay, how do we as Rivers take what we've done in Canada and repeat that in markets around the world?
Yeah. And is there one place in particular that that really catches your eye? I mean, I can imagine the United States, and one of the questions actually one of our investors was asking us was, do you have plans of really hitting the edible side of things,
sure,
especially in the United States, because it's huge over there, drinks, right, and food. Is that something that's catching your eye, or is there something else that's like, you know what, I like that, I'd rather be here instead?
Yeah, sure. Two-part question there. So stuff on the U.S., both, I'll talk specifically with Canopy Rivers and as well as Canopy Growth, but Rivers cannot touch anything that's plant touching in the U.S. because it's a federally illegal market. Which is why we're approaching things from the ancillary, non-plant touching, service providers, technology, equipment, fertilizers, and so on, yeah, that are supporting those operators. So specific to edibles, which is kind of the second part of your question, that's, again, part of that legalization 2.0.
Yeah.
Regulations of which in Canada, we're expected to receive public disclosure, at least a sneak peek, yeah, probably within the next few weeks.
Oh, very nice, actually.
That'll be a sneak peek for regulations that might try and come in, call it around a year after legalization started. And then the commercial operations of which might take a little bit of time to put in as well. But edibles, yeah, like that's, edibles are, the work around edibles is gonna have to start right now, and that's stuff that we're kind of looking into. But it's a separate matter from the United States. Rivers can provide almost indirect exposure to the US because we can't be directly there.
Correct, yeah.
One way that we've done this actually in a few different ways. So the first one would be our investment in TerraSend. So they're a publicly listed licensed producer, and we had exposure there in the form of equity and warrants. We exchanged our position for what is an exchangeable share shortly and in concurrent with the company announcing that they were going to pursue a U.S. strategy, which they can do because they're listed on the CSE.
Gotcha.
So we have a passive exchangeable share that could convert back into our common share when and if all of the approvals and everything is permissible at one day. But there is some exposure, as TerraSend has publicly announced, not exact the details, but have recently brought on a president from, I believe, AbbVie, which is a large pharmaceutical company, in order to lead that pursuit. Secondly would be an investment in Farmhouse. It's actually a joint venture. It's 49-51 between Canopy Rivers 49 and the principals and operators of North America's largest greenhouse company. They, over, I think, last year did something like over $1.5 billion top line in sales of veggie and produce and products, and we are partnered with the principals and operators of that business. Why that's really important is we have a global non-compete with them, which now recently, after Rivers providing funding to that joint venture, includes a non-compete for the United States. As well as also press released a couple weeks ago again, that include, these principals have relationship networks in the United States, Mexico, Peru, Guatemala, places in Europe, and they are our partner. So instead of looking for, greenhouses and scoping the world of, hey, where are we going to build something, we have the principals rather, of North America's leading greenhouse operator to help us pursue our international strategy.
Very unique.
Thirdly, would be Rivers has an investment in AgriFarm. This is a joint venture between Canopy Growth, Organobrands of the United States, and Greenhouse Seeds of the Netherlands. And essentially, this was trading off equity in return for brand distribution rights. Organobrands is one of the leading brand of edibles and vape pens, so Open Vape and District Edibles. They're sold all over the United States, and we actually have some warrants in that business where Canopy Growth gets the distribution rights to those best-selling products and genetics from Europe that have years of brand loyalty, consumer trust, and evidence and product positioning that will be ready for what that legalization 2.0 is. Because through AgriFarm and the Organobrands relationship, we'll be able to bring products that people already know.
It's very interesting, yeah. So you're getting exposure to the United States, but at an arm's length. You're not actually investing in them, but you have the ability to through these different engines that you've been creating, or vehicles, I should say.
Yeah, so we're running what we say is kind of a broad, we call it a unique investment vehicle that is pursuing strategic capital and operational support throughout the global cannabis value chain. And I think in part of what really gives investors the peace of mind, investors of all kinds, shapes, sizes, retail, institutional, and everything in between, is that we're pursuing things in a regulatory and exchange compliant manner because of our TSXV listing and because Canopy Growth also on the TSX and the New York Stock Exchange. So this is a regulatory and exchange compliant way to get unique exposure to verticals that investors simply don't have exposure to in the public markets right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And for anybody who's watching, I mean, I can imagine most people already know this. If you're on the TSX Venture, the TSX, especially if you're on the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ, you cannot specifically have touching the plant of any kind in the United States. And this is a really unique way of not getting around that, but working within the lines of still being able to get a foot in there, but not obviously crossing the line.
Right. And you know what I think what's really interesting, the U.S. seems to be, in some cases, a crystal ball for how Canada might roll out. So Washington, Oregon, California, Nevada, Colorado, and a few others, I think Maine, Massachusetts, and other states like that. Many more that are actually medical. I think it's over half of the U.S. states right now have medical regulations and laws at a state level. But because they've been operating legally, adult use or medical and combined, let's say, a number of those, I think there's 9 states now plus DC, for let's say anywhere from 1 to 5 years or so, it really provides a crystal ball for what kinds of products consumers might want here in Canada, for what kinds of products people are going to be going to, for what kinds of brands people are loyal to. And I think a lot of people sometimes forget about Canada and the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And on the back of our strategic investment from Canopy Growth and them being a strategic partner of ours, and us working close with them, ultimately we're looking to provide return on capital for investors in federally legal compliant jurisdictions. And the US is obviously a very big market, but Europe and South America and Asia and Australia and New Zealand, those markets are bringing in medical cannabis regulations or are in process of doing so. So there's an ability to bring brands that people already trust in established markets, have them tested in Canada in a federally compliant manner, and then brought around the world. And that's part of what we're doing, is Rivers is targeting entrepreneurs that are best in class in each vertical of the value chain, that bring track records of success from other industries that are applying that to cannabis. Mm-hmm. So we want to go after and invest and partner with companies that are the best at what they do, but doing that one thing really, really well. Yeah. So that we can have a cultivator provide product to an extractor, that provides product to a formulator, that sends product to the vape pen, the edibles factory, the beverage bottling factory, that's sold through a retail chain, that's covered by a media outlet, that brings the consumer back to the brand, that's tracked seed to sale. And we want to set up this global supply chain. Yeah. Where we can provide capital to up-and-coming entrepreneurs that want to maintain control of their business, but be able to receive that strategic and operational support that the investment professionals at Rivers can provide, as well as being able to tap into key experts and subject matter experts throughout Canopy Growth as well.
Yeah, and I like that, because when you're going into, a lot of people go into an ETF because they don't know what to buy,
right.
And they don't want to constantly look at something. But when you go into an ETF, they just own that company, or they own shares of that company.
Right.
From what you just explained, what we talked about earlier as well, is that you do have an investment in these companies, whether through these unique vehicles or direct investments into the actual company, into a private placement, whatever it be.
Right.
But also, you're now providing the expertise that you have, Canopy Growth, just all these other elements of increasing the value of these investments. So it's not just you're buying into one of these companies, you're also buying into someone who is actively trying to bring them together, to make them stronger, make them better, and grow it. So
totally.
You're investing in the company, and you're also investing in a team who's helping each individual company. I think that's a rather unique process, especially when it comes to the cannabis space. Not many are doing that.
Totally. The story behind Rivers is the company was formally started about a little over a year and a half ago, actually almost 2 years at this point, in April of 2017. But the story actually starts a year and a half before that.
Gotcha.
So Bruce Linton and the principals of XIB Financial had been looking to acquire assets across the country when it was just Tweed and Bedrocan and Tweed Farms. It was, how do we be local everywhere? They were running into a lot of entrepreneurs through this M&A process, so which took a year and a half, call it starting back in 15 even. They were running into entrepreneurs that weren't quite ready to sell. But it was neither capital efficient, nor did they have a vehicle to put these minority stakes. So that created Rivers. Gotcha. So Canopy Rivers was started, call it almost 2 years ago, but there was already a year and a half or 2 years of work done before that, evaluating up-and-coming entrepreneurs. So their portfolio right now has been largely Canada-centric, but we've been diversifying through the ecosystem, through a media platform, a retailer. We have an investment in a hemp cultivator in Italy. So we're starting to get to different parts of the value chain in different parts of the world. And I think over time, you'll start to see that we're not taking a passive approach. This is something where we can provide a lot of value, and that's something that entrepreneurs actually look for. You can find capital, but it's how do you find capital plus strategic and operational support, and that's something that we're trying to bring.
Well, absolutely. Well, hey, I appreciate very much your time coming down the show, telling us a little bit more about not just who you are, but what you're doing as well. For anybody who's interested more, RIV is the ticker. You can find the TSX Venture. And do you have a website they can go to for more information, investor deck or something?
Yes, it's canopyrivers.com, and we have an investor section there too. You can find our presentation online as well.
Perfect. Well, hey, thank you very much for coming down.
Thank you very much.
Always a pleasure having you on the show. I know you were on here with James earlier. Love hearing the updates. We look forward to having you back on the show soon.